Welcome to TAMA Talks, brought to you by the Torrance Art Museum Advocates. I'm Janine Madden, current TAMA president, and I'd like to thank you for watching. Today, we will be discussing work which is currently on view in the main gallery at the Torrance Art Museum in a show called Risky Business, a Painters Forum, curated by Marie Thibeault and Max Presneill. The show addresses the idea that as concerns and expectations of AI begin to dominate the narrative in our increasingly technologically dependent society, some artists have chosen to reply with the personal mark, with risk-taking, chance, an unknown endpoint, the illogical, and the mystery to provide and produce a reflection of a living, very human experience. The exhibition is on view through May 4th, 2024. The museum is located at 3320 Civic Center Drive in Torrance, California, and is open Tuesday through Saturday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. The admission is always free and donations are gratefully accepted. This discussion is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel with all of our previous TAMA Talks. You can access it from our website, www.tamadvocates.com. We are joined today by artist Barbara Friedman. Barbara has had over 40 solo shows throughout the United States, and reviews of her work have appeared in the New York Times, the Brooklyn Rail, Forbes, Whitehot Magazine, the New York Sun, the Irish Times, Newsday, Art in America, Arts Magazine, the Christian Science Monitor, and Artweek. A group of her paintings were selected for the 2007 issue of New American Paintings, and another group for the 2010 issue. She lives, paints, and teaches in New York City, where she has been a professor of art at Pace University since 1983. Welcome, Barbara. We're so very glad that you could join us today. Let's go ahead and take a look at the piece that you have currently in the TAM show, Risky Business.
Well, the painting I have in Risky Business is part of a series that I called The Hysterical Sublime. It's a series in which I'm thinking about wildlife, bodies, and the blurring of categories. Maybe because being cooped up in Manhattan during the pandemic made me crave the natural world, a range of odd creatures appeared in my paintings and connected with each other in very unexpected ways. Instead of my usual characters, culled from art history, literature, or pop culture, these are creatures I've never seen before. I used to look for the sublime and the ridiculous. Now I'm finding that I tried to find the ridiculous in the sublime. I should emphasize that in these new paintings, I don't start with predetermined imagery. Instead, I pour oil paint on a canvas that I put on the floor. I let these colored paint puddles dry for 4 or 5 days, and eventually I nudged forth the imagery that the dried oil spills suggest. You could even say that I'm polluting color field paintings by bringing forward the imagery I see in them. Basically, I'm not using abstraction as a process of reduction. Rather, I'm using it as a process of recognition. I paint to discover, and I like my work to surprise me. I wanted to have an alchemical ferocity, and in these new paintings, I'm always looking for the accident that charts the way forward. Rather than begin with a fixed narrative, I look for secrets in the paint's secretions. I mean, these are all beings I've never seen before. Their unexpected natures are to be expected because the process that produces these paintings is an exploratory one. I hope that the element of chance in my process echoes the element of chance in evolution itself. Another thing to think about is though the mutual contact that I depict in these paintings speaks to a longed for physical contact, I do recognize that this fantasy of interaction with the natural world is unfortunately also a source of infection. I know that there are pathogens passing between wildlife and humans, so these are scenes of intimacy that we desire, but also fear. Now I think it would be helpful to give a bit of a backstory on how I started doing what I'm doing right now. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of history. For quite a long time, I would start my paintings with a vivid underpainting. In this case, it was a geranium pink, and I would just cover it quite arbitrarily with the underpainting, let the underpainting dry, and then paint an image over it, and wipe or swipe my brush across the whole painting, and thus blurring it, and there would be shards of underpainting that would remain, and I would take those shards, and they often would become, that negative space would often become the image or completely inform the image, and that's just a process that I used for many years. And this is an example of a painting like that. About 10 years ago, I did my typical underpainting. In this case, a very specific blue, Schwenningen blue, and I let it dry, and I was about to paint an image over it completely, but I liked the way it had dried. And instead of painting something, covering it, um, and eradicating the image and seeing what little pieces of underpainting showed up, I decided to use the underpainting as a field, or and to insert something in it.
Mm.
And that's what I did here. In this case, it's a little chalet because my Swiss mother had just died, and it was an homage to her, etc. In any case, I did some paintings like this for about a year, but in the end, they frustrated me, and I returned to painting as I had been painting. But then, 10 years later, 3 or 4 years ago, this painting happened.
Oh my.
And it happened. It happened. Again, I had this alizarin orange underpainting that I, quickly put down, planning to paint a very different image over it. But once again, I liked the way it had dried. And, I really liked the way it had dried, and I didn't want to lose it. And because at the time, Pinocchio was one of my protagonists, was one of
Mm.
the characters that inhabited my paintings, I saw Pinocchio in this underpainting, and I just put those four little blue negative spaces, I painted those four blue shapes and the eye and the mouth, and that was it. It was like very little interference. And
Mhm.
I realized that I was, in terms of using the underpainting like that, I was more interested in turning the whole thing into something, rather than inserting a little incident in it like I had done, earlier.
Mhm.
Somehow that's more challenging and just a little odder, a little more interesting. So, following this painting, I thought about it a while, and I decided, if I were to try to do this, the underpainting probably shouldn't be monochromatic. It would be easier to find something if, I poured more colors down and saw how they interacted and how they dried. And so that's what I started doing.
Oh yeah.
This is one of my first ones. It's called Mouse King. And if put your finger over the eyes, if you take the eyes out, you'll realize that that's exactly how it dried. So it dried like that. And I kind of looked to see what I could pull out with as little intervention as possible. And so that's what I did.
It's like the
And
perfect melding of, like representational or, realism mixed with abstract all on one canvas.
well, I think I guess there's a part of me, the subversive part, you could say, I say, is I'm trying to find the ridiculous and the sublime, or
Sure.
maybe, as the curator said recently, pranking the sublime. Not that, I mean, I love, in a way, they're polluted color field paintings. I mean, I love abstraction and, you know, color field, abstract. I mean, it's not that I don't, um, have, it's not that those pieces don't excite me, but, um, there's also something that can feel very high-minded about it. So I sort of enjoy this tweaking and this doing something that you're really not supposed to do. It's kind of the absolute worst thing you can do. Um, so that's what I started doing.
Yes. Wow.
This is called Early Bird. And I realize I I realize that they do sort of suggest these odd hybrids that, you know, might occur. And I think for me, I'd like the chance in the process to possibly echo the chance in evolution,
Mhm.
the accidental in both. Who
Mhm.
knows? But I think that's all in there. I'm always looking for the accident to chart the way forward. So this is called Why Did the Chicken Cross the Road, which is a existential query that I've always, loved.
Yes.
And I guess in this case, he crossed the road because he has a beast of burden on his back. But again, it's pulling stuff out. Obviously, this pointing hand and finger, I didn't paint, that was there. You can sort of see what was there and where I went in.
Do you take
Uh,
an image of the piece before you apply the second process?
that's a perfect question. Yes.
You
It's
do?
terrifying. It's
Oh,
terrifying.
wow.
No, it's terrifying to me because um I'm used to somebody who's always painting stuff in and out and building up and taking, just constantly working a piece to death and attacking it. And often my paint, used to be very thick, and here it's so fragile. And can you see my cursor if I go like this?
I can, yes, yes.
Um, well, I mean, obviously, if I do anything to most area it's gone. I can never get the surface back. I mean, the sort of the magic is gone. I
Mhm.
mean, once I commit to painting, so to speak,
Mhm.
after it's dried, that's it. I can't, it's so, I can repaint this a million times if I want because it's already been painted. But so yeah, so I do. So what I do is I let it dry, and then I think about it for a while. And then I kind of plunge in terrified. And then I sometimes, maybe I'll start and I'll change my mind and turn it around, and there'll be like, some eye somewhere that just, it doesn't make any sense. It's okay.
Right, right.
You know, So
It's a fascinating process, really.
thank you. And here's the painting that's in the show.
Okay.
And there's obviously a little more intervention, here, and well, this was there, that dried there, right? So here and this area. But, I kind of just went with this as a suggested shape, and this and this. Those were all, that's how it dried. So that sort of gave me the structure to work with, or that I decided to go with.
Mhm.
And it's also very important to me that it's oil and not acrylic. I guess I feel that I like the alchemical quality of it. It feels um it feels a little more, the way it dries and the way the terp and the oil separate,
Mhm.
a little more unexpected.
And you said it takes about 5 days, yes?
Well, and it's funny because, I use a ton of terp, which of course is a little scary. So I wear a mask and the window's open. I have a fan on, but I still think it's scary.
Mhm.
Um, and I just, I'm always, as I'm doing it, maybe I'm kind of doing the pouring and stuff for about an hour or so, an hour and a half. And, I don't like what it's doing. So I keep pouring terp over it while I'm doing.
Okay.
So
Mhm.
it disperses more. And then some more pigment, some more terp. And then, at a certain point, I get super frustrated and just leave the studio, close the door. And then I sneak in the next morning, and of course it's in no way dry. There are these large pools of terp. And then maybe by the following evening, I start to get a germ of an idea. And then the next day it's dried completely differently. Everything's
Oh,
completely moved around, because it keeps moving. And so that's also kind of weird.
yeah, there's that.
you know,
So you have
yeah,
some control over it in that you can add more thinner, you can add more pigment,
but I only do
but
it initially. I only do it in that first hour and a half. I
ah,
don't do it during the 5 days. I'm
wow,
just letting it dry. I mean, I could, but I'm just letting it dry and watching the puddles move around.
sure.
And then, once it's dry, the paint is, there's it's on the surface and it stays on the surface, but it really is there's not much binder. It's almost like pure pigment in a way.
Hmm, hmm.
So anyway,
And
um
I will ask, so it came, this particular piece came fairly early on in your, in the, uh,
no, these aren't chronological. That's a
oh,
good.
okay. I was gonna say because,
Yeah. Yeah,
how did you decide which one you wanted to include in Risky
I
Business?
didn't, you
Oh,
know, I sent a few images to Marie and Max, and they chose. And I was thinking, one thing I did notice during the show is that my work actually looked kind of quiet in the show, which I never would have expected because it's not quiet work. Um, Yet, this one might be a little quieter. The colors aren't quite as aggressive, and yeah, and so maybe had I really thought about the nature of the show more, because I think the paintings in the show tend to be all over paintings. They're very, very gestural. Most of them are, and they're brush strokes that activate the entire surface. Where mine is a little, more shape based, really. That's sort of, it's kind of more emergent. Um, and so I think I might have chosen one that was a little more frenetic. Just had I thought about that. So that was interesting. It made me think about it. I've had a few shows. I had a one-person show this fall, but I haven't shown these new pieces in many group shows.
ah,
So it was interesting to think about in like one piece, which is very different because these pieces kind of speak to each other. One piece in a large context. So that was, it was really interesting to see and think about.
yes, yes.
Anyway, I'll let's see. Um, so this was maybe a little earlier than the piece in the show. This is all within 3 years, though.
Okay.
This is called Nut Job. And so they're not all animals. It really is whatever is suggested. But I guess, as I had mentioned, my goal is to turn the whole thing into something as opposed to just inserting a little moment.
Right, which like what you had done with the chalet.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, it's almost
Um,
the converse of it, right?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this I call stuffed shirt.
The
You
titles
know,
are rather whimsical, but appropriate for the subject.
This is blue spittle. And oh, and speaking of the spittle, which is clearly here, when I pour paint on the canvases, I just, squeeze paint into a coffee can and throw turp in it and take the back of a brush or something, like a brush handle and kind of mix, but I don't mix that well,
Mhm.
partly because I'm lazy and, I don't know. So when I pour it out, often granular pieces of paint fall out. And I don't mind that. I like that tension, that contrast, and they become important somehow. I have no idea where they'll fall or how often that'll happen, but that's just another thing.
And are
So
the vertical lines on the upper portion of that mouth, that are they just form organically as it's drying?
oh yes, the
You don't
only
push
thing,
them in.
absolutely no. The only thing I painted, I did a little more here, but it's all just in here. You see
Okay.
the cursor, right? So
Yeah.
this tongue and this, squirrel or whatever, his face, they're the same. They're just part of what was there. But I painted the dark
Oh,
around it.
I
You know what I
see.
mean? But
I
they
see.
were
Yeah.
there. I like the fact that this to me felt very tongue-like, like the
Mhm.
color and the texture felt like a tongue. So, and this was here, because often the terp will kind of settle somewhere and then there'll be the indication of a circular area where, where
Puddle.
most of it, a puddle.
Mhm.
But so I obviously painted the teeth and I darkened the uvula and I darkened this, but, otherwise it's more, just little details right in here and that's it.
This piece
But
is
the rest of it is all, sorry, yes?
no, I was going to say this piece is particularly surreal. I mean, there is a surreal quality to all of them, but this one in particular is and maybe it's the darkness around the uvula. I'm not really sure, but it's interestingly magical.
Well, you know what's weird about this piece? It didn't have all this information. It wasn't as dark. It didn't have the uvula, didn't have the teeth. It just had the scroll and the tongue. And it needed more. It needed dark, so sometimes they just need more. And it takes me a long time to realize that because
Mhm.
I don't want to do too much to these. I want to keep them on the edge. But this one it needed it.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think this stuff happened maybe 8 months after I thought it was finished. It just
Oh,
somehow,
oh my goodness. So you finished, air quote, finished it, but then went back afterward and said, it needs more. I'm going to paint on it again.
yes, well, I do a few at the same time and I think they're finished. They're different stopping points. But but then, I'm not happy with it,
Sure.
or it
Sure.
just doesn't. So, but they're hard to return to. I just have to know what they need. It just takes a long time
Mhm.
for me to
Mhm.
figure that out.
Yeah, little period of discernment.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Ah, I'm going to tilt my head.
Well, I guess this is, all I did very little. This, I just sort of this stroke here and then this very casually indicated eye. That's it.
Wow.
So that was very kind of,
Like
it just,
emerging from the,
yeah. And it happened pretty, it dried in a way that I didn't feel like doing much to it.
Mhm. Wow. It's amazing. So again, in this piece, all of that, all of
Oh,
those vertical lines are really just how it dried.
oh, absolutely. 100%. I painted the tusks, right? And just this little line for an indication of an eye. Oh,
Yeah.
and I think I did a little dark here,
Just to kind of differentiate what would be
Yeah,
the
it was already dark, but not dark enough. So I might have done something, but that's it.
Mhm. Fascinating.
This, I went back into several times. This took, I don't know, a long time to figure out.
And there's that sort of what did you call it? But did you call it begonia or geranium pink.
Oh, Geranium Lake, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it's so interesting. Oh, I love that because I love spiders, or arachnids, bugs. Um, it's so interesting because John Getz and I were chatting earlier today, and we were talking about when at the Torrance Art Museum, we used to have a program where we would have kids come in, and they would often say, like, "Oh, I see a dog." You know what I mean? Like, with it had the eye and the little indication of the ear not been drawn in, they I guess it's what anthropomorphize, is that the term where you sort of
Yeah.
make up something, but you're actually doing it. Like, you're picking out what that piece is and turning it into a subject, like a recognizable subject.
Which you're really not supposed to. I mean, not supposed to. I mean, but I mean, most of my friends, a lot of my friends work abstractly, are non-representational painters. And the thing that I'm sure they always hated most was, I can see a bunny, or I can,
Yes,
that's
Max says all
really,
that. He says that all the time. It's not a dolphin.
yeah, I mean, it's really, so I thought, okay, I'm going to make it a dolphin.
Right,
Or
right.
I'm going to really pull out the dolphin that it in fact is. No,
Sure, sure. Yeah. Well, you run that risk. Like, Max and I have had conversations about that, in this idea that, there are some artists who say, look at my work and you see what you're going to see. And you might see something today that you don't see tomorrow, and
right,
you might see
right.
something yesterday that you didn't see today. And he always says, but it is not a dolphin. And I always want to say, but maybe it is to someone. You just don't know in abstract art, you just don't know what people's brains are seeing. It's kind of like looking at clouds, right?
Totally. I actually had a show called Very Like a Cloud. No, actually it was called Very Like a Whale from Hamlet, because Polonius was looking at clouds and he and Hamlet were talking about the clouds, and I guess Polonius said very like a whale, or it's very like a whale. So that was the title of my show.
Nice, nice.
I mean, it really is the proverbial looking at clouds.
Mhm.
But of course, I want them to be super serious abstractions too.
True, but your technical skill at the realism part is amazing. And so, not whether it's unfortunate or not, my eye goes to what it can easily recognize. Whereas if those things were missing, if you had showed us an image of the work before you had modified it, that kind of comparison would be an interesting one.
That would be interesting. You'd be surprised at how close it is sometimes.
Yeah, see,
Sometimes it's really close.
yeah.
I
Mhm.
mean, so yeah.
Fascinating. Yes, I like it. I like it. Okay.
So there it is, a little thing. It's a little closer in a way to that chalet piece from years ago. But there was a smudge there, and you can't see on the slide. There's also a big clot of black or dark, that's in high relief in the area, where the fly is.
Okay.
So I just had to, it just felt like it was buzzing and in motion. So I had to do that. You know what I mean? It
Yes.
represented itself.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's why it's yours, right? So that's what you look at, and that's what you see, and that's your
right.
choice.
So this one became much more narrative, though it didn't look, it looked pretty much like this. I mean, it dried pretty much like this, but the lobster was kind of there. I mean, I obviously, there's some line work here. But it was very easy to make that area into a lobster. It took almost nothing, but it wasn't somehow enough. So in this case, I actually painted, this butter bowl, like just straight painted it.
Okay.
And that's making it, this kind of maudlin
Yeah,
will. You know, they're not usually, but in this case, it just felt fitting.
right. And that lobster has been cooked because that's the color they turn
I know,
when
except
you
that
when you cook them. So that's
he's
amazing.
cooked, but he's alive and drinking
Yes,
butter that he's going to,
exactly. Yeah, it
you
is a
know,
bit,
so, I mean,
it's a
God
bit
knows.
of a horror.
Yeah, right. So it's horror upon horror. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay. S-
So I think, I don't know, I think I call this Mount Rushmore, but I'm not, I keep changing. I don't know.
Mhm.
Um, this one had a second pour on it because I didn't like where it was going, like after a few months. So you can see that there's an image that emerges from underneath. I don't usually do second pours, but if
Okay.
I really don't like something, I do.
Okay.
So that
And
happens occasionally.
that's interesting in that as opposed to abandoning it, you choose to modify it again to see if you get a different result.
That's exactly right. You really, you're saying the right, you're saying apt things. My daughter, who's also an artist, can give me grief about that and said, just give up if it's not working. But I can't bring my,
Well,
you
the
know,
nature of what you're doing gives you basically a new start every time you add new paint.
no, no, the problem is, and I don't have examples here to show you, but I think these paintings in general really depend on the white light coming from the primer.
Ah,
Like
okay. Okay.
this is all primer, right? Now there's not
Right.
much here. This is pretty covered compared to some of them, right?
Okay. Okay.
White. But I think when I lose that blaze of white,
Yes.
it becomes a very different thing.
Now, is the white paint that's added over thinner, and that's why
Totally
it
different.
creates those little lines?
No. This is from the primer. See, is
Okay.
meaning this is just the white of the canvas or the linen.
Oh, I
So
see. I
it's
see.
very
Ah, okay.
luminous. It's
I see.
very, it's like a watercolor a little bit. I mean, it's much more intense than a watercolor. The
Sure.
pigment feels much, but there's something almost blinding about the white that comes through. And this here, you're seeing is white paint that I poured, which
I
is
see.
very different.
Okay. Okay.
It's just different. And when I and if I pour second or third time, I lose more and more of the primer. I risk, and I can't mask these paintings because, well, first of all, they're oil, so
Sure.
it's a lot harder to use a matte, like a stenciling liquid or something.
Yes.
But
Yes.
also, even if
Yes.
I did, I would have clean edges, and clean edges don't really work in these paintings
Right.
because
Right.
everything is amorphous. And so I can't really control when I pour, I can't really control where it goes.
Yeah.
I can kind of, but not really. So it's scary to pour again.
Like
I mean,
every piece,
I did it here.
like every piece we talk about in every single one of these talks, this one begs to be seen in person, right? I think when you're looking at an image of the image, an image of the piece, a little bit may be lost on this particular one because I would love to be able to see that. Is there a 3D quality to the primer that's showing through?
I think I'm looking at them. I think they feel very illuminated. They feel backlit a little bit.
Okay. Okay.
Maybe
Oh,
you get it,
wow.
you know? So you can see like this is all, the canvas, just you know what I mean? That's very different.
Yes.
With, you
Not
know,
white paint.
yeah, no, there's no white paint here at all.
Oh,
Maybe
wow.
right here. You see what I mean? Right in the pupil.
Oh, I see the difference
yeah.
now. Yes, right.
That's,
It
you know,
does have
slightly,
a,
that's probably slightly grayed down anyway, but you see the difference. It's
yes,
okay. So
yes.
it's just, so there's, these are kind of out of control paintings in a way. Um,
Yeah. Oh, it's very Mark Chagall-y to me. Huh.
it's called tongued. Yes.
I like that pink. And did you paint in the pink after?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The pink is opaque.
Okay.
That was my sort of interjection.
Oh, wow.
So it's probably becoming obvious to you where I paint, you know, where I added the paint, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I think, like you said, waiting for it to kind of reveal itself to you
Yeah.
after days, when you could look
Yes.
on day one and say, oh, I think this might be X, if you decide to go in and even take a peek. But there's such
Right.
kind of revelatory surprise
Right.
that happens on day 5 when you're like, oh, I guess
Yeah.
that's going to be something else.
But it's upsetting because sometimes there are things that I'm excited by that I completely
Yeah.
lose.
Right.
Right. Or,
Right.
I mean, there's nothing. But
Now, let me see. Oh, I see the hand. At first I
there's,
saw a ray, like a skate, like a
right. Yeah.
stingray.
Yeah. I think people see different things, you know, like, but I guess this is sort of supposed to be a head, right? A
I see
baby's
the
head.
eyes and the nose and the mouth.
And this is one arm, I guess.
Ah,
I
I
mean,
see it.
it's
I see it
probably,
now. Yes. Okay.
I mean, the arms don't really match. I
Yeah.
mean, this is completely stylized because I was basing it on this as the hand.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
oh, I think that's it.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, park yourself on one of them, whichever one you like, that you could pick the one in the show if you'd like. Um, because the process itself is just absolutely amazing. And the part, anyone is fine, but the one in the
Okay.
show would be, I love this one. But I think that, again, one of the main reasons why we do this is because if you went into the show and saw a piece like this, per se, like, let's say, without really knowing what your process was, then, I mean, I think that the process lends so much to the image, because otherwise you would think that you painted it to look like this, as opposed to the paint forming and then you modifying what it looks like. Those things are really different in my brain.
That's a good way of describing it.
But yeah, it's
But-
really two completely different processes. So fascinating, absolutely
so,
fascinating. So
Janine, I think when you see it, I think you can kind of tell that it would be impossible to paint this.
mm,
Do you know what I mean? But maybe not so much reproduced.
right. And I think, again, what I personally would find very interesting would be the image of it prior to the modification, before you added, before you selected what portion was going to be what. Like, was it so obvious that when you looked at it, you thought, okay, this is going, the way that the paint has dried has emerged into this mouse that I am now going to paint.
Would you like me to go to my photos and find like an image that
Any before image might be really cool, just to
Well,
show.
give me 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna, so I just realized I'd forgotten this one, which I quite liked.
Yes.
So, and I thought that I do have a before shot of this, but I couldn't find it. So, but, again, I see this, I call this duck rabbit with fetus. So I see this area as a fetus.
Oh,
And obviously, and I did nothing that, chance created that, but I, painted the eye and, the mouth, and I articulated a kind of ear beak, so to
right.
speak.
When I looked
But,
at it, I saw the duck, not the
but,
rabbit.
it was pretty much there. But now to show you, I did find quickly a few that really were when I started. So, okay, so this is the way it was. Sorry. This is the way it was when I poured it.
Okay.
You see, down here is just the floor. It's not cropped.
Right. Right. Okay.
So
That's just the canvas.
that's just the canvas, because I did this over the summer and I wasn't able to work. It wasn't stretched because I wasn't at home. So I was far away and I couldn't. So normally I work on stretched canvas, but in this case I just stapled it to a piece of wood, which
Oh,
is why it's a more agitated surface. It dried because it wasn't stretched as tightly. But anyway, just to kind of show you. So this is the way it dried. And let me find,
I think it might be right next to it.
yes.
Oh, wow.
So,
Wow.
and I don't even know that I needed the nostril and the eye. Maybe I could have just had one or the other. But you see how close, right?
Yes. And
But
I think
here
by
it's
adding
right.
the nostril, it makes it more equine, right?
Yes.
Or is it a ram or is it a horse? Or does it
I
matter?
see it. It doesn't matter, but I see it as equine. I
Yeah.
definitely see it as, but just to give you an example, another one, a sort of this is how this dried. And again, it's a more agitated surface because I also did it, far away. And then this is what it was after it dried.
Wow.
So
That's
that's sort
amazing.
of,
That's so profound when you do that, because
oh,
I will
really?
tell you,
Okay.
there's
Okay.
no way that I would ever in a million thousand years come up with that from the
Come
before.
up with something else. I mean, everybody would
Maybe,
come
but I
up
think
with
it's
whatever.
the skill set to be able to add in those darker areas that define the shape of what it's going to be.
In this case, not in every case, but in different,
Mhm.
I'm trying to remember what it was. There was already a dark area here. This already, I guess I suggested, something looking down,
Mhm, mhm.
but obviously the bottom needed some kind of articulation.
Wow, that's
But
amazing. Yeah.
anyway, but thanks for asking me about that.
Sure. I have to say it really, really changes a lot. When,
Really? Okay.
yes, I really think so. Not that you'd want to do it for every single one, although the idea of having a show of just the before and after is crazy good, because I don't know what I was thinking. I think maybe I thought that the before would instantly, I would look at it and say, oh yeah, I saw exactly what she did. But yes, no, that did not happen. That did not happen. So
Oh,
absolutely.
I have a process shot too. I think I put in. Let me
Oh, okay,
just
please. Yes.
here.
Oh my.
So you can see this is the lobster one. This
Oh,
one I
yes.
didn't show you, but this, can you see? So that's the lobster
Yes.
one.
Yes.
And
Yes.
there's me,
With
with
yeah,
the
some
mask on,
protective gear on.
right?
Yes.
But just since you're there, let me pull up, okay?
Wow.
Right? So, I mean, you don't see it well, but you kind of, right?
Mhm. And did you go back over the lobster with that color paint? cooked lobster red.
I
made,
probably, you know, I didn't go, oh, I mean, I just added, I didn't like this draw, this is what you saw.
right?
So it was just a question of some lines,
Okay.
you know, like
Yeah.
like, I don't know, painting this, right?
Yes.
But I don't think I had to do too much. I didn't really touch the color. Because yeah,
Yeah.
I-
Love it.
thank you. And
I love it.
thanks for your very to the point questions. They really
Yeah.
were.
Fantastic. Well, again, this is one of those, sometimes people will just talk in very general terms about their work and maybe where they went to take it, if it was an image or something like that. But this, your talk and your explanation of not only the process, well, specifically of the process, but also just that idea of waiting the 5 days, and then I don't know, I just find it fascinating. But I do think that it lends a lot to understanding the work as it exists in this particular show, because we didn't even get into the whole AI part, or we didn't even talk about it. This idea that, you know, this show, Risky Business, is an artist taking a risk I'm assuming, and again, this particular, the didactic that was written about the show is hard for me to comprehend a little bit, because I understand the concept, which would be for artists who are, you know, mark making and painting the way that they do, to make it incredibly personal and human, and show their inspiration on the canvas when it's completed. But in your case, it's a little bit different than the other pieces that are up.
It is. It is. I realize that, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
because I think, yeah, I don't really think, I mean, I knew so little about AI, and it's only recently that, you know, I don't know, somehow the enormity of it, you know,
Yes.
is
Yeah.
sort of hitting me. And yeah, it's really, really recent. But I suppose in some ways, you know, one thing, I know an artist who, I mean, I think a lot of artists do this, but I guess one, you know, I do know somebody who puts in his drawings, like his drawings.
Mhm.
That information is already there, and then he'll give the program a prompt, so it
Yes.
can kind of mess with his drawing.
Yes. Yes. I
And
mean,
in a way, this kind of echoes my process, you know, because there's always mediation, you know, there's mediation in my process, which is the accident. And there's always been a version of that in my work, because I like something to, you know, contradict the handmade, to go against the handmade in my work, even though it's very handmade.
right. But again, there's a lot left to, you know, the chemical
Right.
mixing of the paint and the turpentine.
A ton, I mean, 80%, I
Right.
mean, or whatever, you know, a huge amount. Yeah.
Right. Which in, for me, like, I'm a science girl. So for me,
Oh,
that part is extraordinary. That idea that your application, so it kind of is like AI, right?
yeah, that's what I was
Application,
saying. There's a
right.
funny, even though I'm like the least technological person in the world, I mean, I'm really a Luddite, like horribly so. So it's funny. But
Yeah.
yes, I guess there's the desire to give control elsewhere on my
Right.
part.
Right.
Oh,
You're choosing the color. So you choose the palette, you
yeah,
choose how much paint, you choose how much turpentine, you choose
yeah,
the size of the surface, but then you sort of leave it up to air.
totally. Totally.
Yeah.
I mean,
I loved
100%.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's
it's kind of,
amazing.
yeah.
And the other part that I look at is that you could have a whole show of just your work without a modification to it.
I could, but I'm not, you
But that's
know,
not you. I mean, that's
not
not
when I'm,
you,
yeah,
but
yeah,
but from an abstract painting perspective,
yeah,
then that
sure.
process lends itself to just the idea of, I've chosen these, you know, 5 parts or whatever it is, however many colors of paint I'm choosing, and the kind and which colors. to create something that is going to kind of coalesce on its own.
Right.
I
I
love
guess,
it.
you could say I'm looking for secrets in the
Yes,
paint.
exactly.
It's like,
Exactly. And that's
it's,
what they
you know,
serve you, right? So,
right,
so
that's
you're
how it,
looking for secrets, and then you reveal them with the application of whether it becomes a, a shirt collar or a
yeah,
snout.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well,
That's,
thank you
well,
so
thank you so
much.
much, Jean. It was
Yeah, this was fascinating.
really,
Absolutely
really enjoyed
amazing.
it.
Let me see if I can navigate. Hold on one second. We saw this piece, and we saw this piece, and we saw this piece. These
Yeah.
must have been in a show that I may have linked to, either not a show, sorry. These must have been in an interview that I linked to.
Okay.
These were embedded in an interview. So I
Okay.
did just want to say thank you so much. I did embed your website on this final slide. And when I post it to our social media and our website, not our website, but our Facebook, I will link to your website so people can take a look and see
That's great.
and explore, explore what you've done further. So thank you so very much.
Well, it was really enjoyable.
Great.